starting with text 23, 25, 20. Those of you that have some way to look up the verse, 3, 25, 20, we'll chant the verse responsibly. Prasangam arjaram pasham atmana kavayo viduhu sa eva sadhushu krito mokshadvaram apavritam prasangam ajaram pasham atmana kavayo viduhu sa eva sadhushu krito moksha dvaram apavritam. Translation: every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul, but that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. Moksha dvaram apavritam. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here is clearly stated that attachment for one thing is the cause of bondage in the conditioned life, and the same attachment, when applied to something else, opens the door of liberation. Attachment cannot be killed, semicolon. It has simply to be transferred. Attachment for material things is called material consciousness, and attachment for Krishna or his devotee is called Krishna consciousness. Consciousness, therefore, is the platform of attachment. It is clearly stated here that when we simply purify the consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness, we attain liberation. Despite the statement that one should give up attachment, desirelessness is not possible for a living entity. A living entity, by constitution, has the propensity to be attached to something. We see that if someone has no object of attachment, if he has no children, then he transfers his attachment to cats and dogs. This indicates that the propensity for attachment cannot be stopped, semicolon. It must be utilized for the best purpose. Our attachment for material things perpetuates our conditional state. But the same attachment, when transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee, is the source of liberation. Paragraph. Here it is recommended that attachment should be transferred to the self-realized devotees or the sadhus. And who is a sadhu? A sadhu is not just an ordinary man with saffron robe or long beard. A sadhu is described in Bhagavad Gita as one who unflinchingly engages in devotional service, even though one is found not to be following the strict rules and regulations of devotional service. If one simply has unflinching faith in Krishna, the Supreme Person, he is understood to be a sadhu. Sadhur eva samantavya. A sadhu is a strict follower of devotional service. It is recommended here that if one at all wants to realize Brahman or spiritual perfection, his attachment should be transferred to the sadhu or devotee. Lord Chaitanya also confirmed this, lavamatra sadhu sange sarva siddhihai. Simply by a moment's association with a sadhu, one can attain perfection. And final paragraph. Mahatma is a synonym of sadhu. It is said that the service to a Mahatma, or elevated devotee of the Lord, is Dvaram Ahur Vimukte, the royal road of liberation. Mahat Sevam Dvaram Ahur Vimuktes Tamo Dvaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. Bhagavatam 552. Rendering service to the materialists has the opposite effect. If anyone offers service to a gross materialist or a person engaged only in sense enjoyment, then, by association with such a person, the door to hell is opened. The same principle is confirmed here. Attachment to a devotee is attachment to the service of the Lord, because if one associates with a sadhu, the result will be that the sadhu will teach him how to become a devotee, a worshipper, and a sincere servitor of the Lord. These are the gifts of a sadhu. If we want to associate with a sadhu, we cannot expect him to give us instructions on how to improve our material condition, but he will give us instructions on how to cut the knot of contamination of material attraction and how to elevate ourselves in devotional service. That is the result of associating with a sadhu. Kapila Muni first of all instructs that the path of liberation begins with such association. I selected this verse, text 20, because it's the first of 8 verses that are among some circles of Vaishnavas known as Sadhu Sangastaka, Ashtaka, 8 verses, extolling the virtue of Sadhu Sangha. This verse comes in response to a question that Devahuti asks at the beginning of this chapter 25. After hearing many things from her son, knowing him to be the personality of Godhead, she wants to know, you're going to leave, my husband is already gone, and you're also going to go, and I'll be alone. How am I going to sustain my spiritual well-being, given that I have, as a woman, I have attachments to the temporary? So what's the solution? What is your instruction for me? Now it's a little role reversal kind of, where the mother is asking the son. But on the other hand, the mother is a pure devotee, and she knows that her son is the personality of Godhead. She knows that. Because she's a pure devotee, she knows that. So somehow she's been fortunate enough to have the personality of Godhead as her son. And here he is now a young man in his Leela, and she's anticipating after some time he's also going to leave as my husband left. So I want instructions, knowing that they'll be absent. I want instructions to take shelter of, so that my protection will continue in the absence of my husband, my son. In the absence of my son, the instructions, her place of shelter. The immediate answer that he gives to her question, there's a whole long conversation where she speaks, and the very first thing he says is association with sadhus. Now, in these 8 verses, he's going to elaborate on what is that Sadhu Sangha. And this is the first of the verses, just laying down a principle of association, or through association and service than attachment, because, as is explained in the purport, attachment is natural, or the idea of non-attachment is fiction. The idea of desirelessness is fiction. Why? Because living entities by constitution have desire. Living entities by constitution, as souls, they have a natural transcendental object of desire or affection or attachment at the soul level. You can't take away that which is of the soul any more than you can take away the soul's eternality. You can't take it away. You can't bring some material condition and burn the soul or wither the soul by wind or moisten the soul by water. The soul is transcendental, and this is one of the transcendental attributes of the soul. The soul has desire, and with the desire, there's objects. So in transcendental reality, the object is the Supreme Person. In transcendental reality, the object of desire and attachment and affection is the Supreme Person. When that becomes covered, then there's some other object of desire, attachment, and affection. It can't be taken from the soul. It's of the soul. So the verse is saying that very same attachment, that's the dvaram, or doorway or gate to material contamination, or gate to hell from different verses. The very same principle of attachment to the temporary should be spiritual cultivation. He's instructing is that very same tendency is to be directed to the eternal, and specifically to sadhu, because this is one of these mysteries. We touched on it yesterday evening with the Chinese devotees. But the principle is the representative of the Supreme is to be respected as in a manner that's non-different than one respects the Supreme. Just touching on yesterday's topic, it is said that there are two topics. Gaudiya Vaishnavas speak that there's two topics very difficult to understand. I mean, you can talk about them, but to understand them is another. Shiva Tattva and Guru Tattva. This is Sadhu Tattva, but Sadhu means, in one sense, it means Guru, because it may not be Diksha Guru, but one who gives instructions. We don't have any indication here that Kapila Dev received Diksha. She's to his mother, but he's giving Shiksha to his mother. So he's Sadhu and he's Guru for his mother. That's a function that is part of spiritual culture. Just this morning I was listening to a lecture given by Srila Prabhupada in, I think it was 1968. He was in New Vrindavan, and there was a question, the question answer, what's the relationship between Christ and Krishna? You know, early in the Hare Krishna movement, Christian audience, what's the relation between Christ and Krishna? Prabhupada gave a funny answer. He said, you don't know? You must know. Why are you asking me? Father and Son. And then he went on to explain the same principle. The Son is the representative of the Father in Vedic culture. The Son has a duty to the Father has a duty to Son, and publicly or interpersonally, the Son is a representative of the Father. So Christ is the Son and Krishna is the Father. It's one of these philosophical things that frankly confuses or is misunderstood, largely, not entirely, but largely misunderstood in Christian theology. Just we'll get back to what this verse is saying, but in Christian theology, some Christian theologians take the one part, it directly connects to our topic yesterday evening. Christ said, God, the Father and I are one. The Father and I are one, which is true, that's the oneness. And then he also says, God the Father has sent me. That's two. So that looks like a contradiction. Are they one? So Christ is God. Many people just take that one. Christ is God. Whoops. God the Father has sent me. Well, that's okay. He's God. God sent God. There's other things. He sitteth on the right hand of the Lord and things like that, and from the Bible. So if there's this proper understanding of oneness and difference, which isn't easy, we'll say it again. Guru Tattva is not easy, as Shiva Tattva is not easy. So, like the discussion yesterday, is the name of Lord Shiva not different than the name of Lord Vishnu, or is the name of Lord Shiva is different from the name of Lord Vishnu? And it's an offense to think that they're equal. And it have everything to do with this oneness and difference. And the oneness, just to underline it again, because we'll come back to this verse, the oneness has to do with the dearness that the Lord holds for the sadhu, or the dearness that the Lord holds for the guru, or the dearness that the Lord holds for Christ, or the dearness that one holds, that God holds for one who holds him dear. It's a very simple principle. It's a principle of love. One who is one has become beholden to one who feels and consistently displays love for the object, the beloved. So the beloved has feelings. It's natural. Even without those feelings, it's still natural. Where, let's say, parents have affection for their child. It's just the way it is. Just the way it's not. You don't go to school to learn it. It's natural in all species of life. In all species of life, there's a natural affinity between mother and the offspring from the mother. It's natural. It's God's arrangement. There's a natural affinity. So what to speak of if one gets elevated to the spiritual platform and starts to understand, whoa, that affinity is really an affinity for the Supreme because, and then fill in the blank. So revive spiritual consciousness does not mean dismissing material affinity, making it zero, becoming desireless, having no affinity. But that affinity needs to be transferred. That's the art or the science or the way of life of spiritualizing our existence, and that is that affinity or attachment or affection is to be transferred to Krishna. And when you transfer that affection to Krishna, it doesn't make the other object zero. It doesn't make the sadhu zero, it doesn't make the guru zero, it doesn't make Christ zero, it doesn't make your children zero, it doesn't make an object zero. But the affinity that's natural is to be spiritualized or made transcendental by transferring that tendency for affinity or attachment or affection to the Supreme. And then it makes that affinity or affection or attachment transcendental. Is it possible? Certainly possible. Is it common? Very uncommon. But that's the challenge. It doesn't have to be parent and child, any relationship. The covering, the illusory covering, is to not see the object, the spiritual object. And then in the absence of that seeing and feeling and willing in relation to the spiritual object, the supreme, the source of everything, one develops affinity for that which is from the source of everything, and that's material life. So circle back to Devahuti's question, how do I get beyond my affinity for matter? The answer he gives succinctly is Sadhu Sangha. This how-to question, zillion varieties of the how-to question. It's Sadhu Sangha. It's right in Kapila's teachings to Devahuti, and it's common sense. The problem is, one more time, the problem is the attachment for the temporary. From the attachment to the temporary, which is a product of forgetfulness of Krishna, we have attachment, we have conditioning by the modes of nature and karma and so forth, and bodies and the whole shebang. We have tendencies that are away from. So how to overcome those tendencies that are away from? By Sadhu Sangha. Then comes this key principle of how to see sadhu in relation to Krishna. How to see this difficult thing to understand, the difference in non-difference. It's not the sadhu is not just a means to an end. That's impersonal. Here's the impersonal. Prabhupada explains. If one is an impersonalist, one may or does take shelter of Guru, but after one becomes liberated, you throw the Guru away. Like you become one with Brahman, you don't need Guru anymore. You need a ladder to climb to a higher place. Once you climb to a higher place, you don't need a ladder anymore. You have a deity, and you worship the deity, and once you're liberated, you throw the deity in the ocean or the river. Ceremoniously. To indicate karma sannyas. Giving up of the false identity with that which is temporary. And deity is temporary, and gurus and everything, not only temporary, it's false. So you give up the false, and you become one with Brahman. So that's not Vaishnava understanding by any means. So what's to not go to the material side and not to go to the negation side, then it's not just a balance, it's just proper understanding. In the Bhagavatam, this verse and this section is giving the foundational understanding. Well, here's some more. There's qualities of a sadhu and how to serve and associate with sadhu and so forth. This is just establishing a principle. What last time? I'm going to end. What's the principle? The material side is attachment to objects that are temporary. The spiritual side is attachment to the object which is not material. That's sadhu, because that's the conduit or the connection with this supreme transcendental. Well, wait a minute. Sadhu is also born and dies, and so what are we getting attached to? Are we getting attached to something temporary again? It's not the body of the sadhu, it's the Shakti or the empowerment of being a representative of Krishna that the sadhu carries. Like a bhakta carries bhakti. So the respect goes to the bhakti, not to the body. And so we may do things in relation to the body that are signs of respect, but the real, at least the Krishna conscious position is that which is spiritual, and the respect goes to that which is spiritual. And that bhakti is fully spiritual. We hear in Krishna's words in Bhagavad Gita, bhakti is performed from the platform of liberation. Say it the reverse. Liberation is the platform from which bhakti is performed. Say it the other way. Bhakti is performed from the platform of liberation. Or when those of us, congratulations, Prabhus, you're liberated. Well, provided that you are engaged in bhakti. So what happens if you're a mixed devotee? Well, bhakti is operating and some other things are operating, and that's the mix. So our duty or our opportunity is move more to the bhakti side while we're doing that which is of this world side. Job, use of money, friends, family, society, and stuff. Stuff means, dravya, your the material objects, your home, your paraphernalia, your car, your cell phone, and your computer, and your stuff. If the inside is attachment, moving towards attachment, in the mood of service to Krishna, then that spiritualizes the computer and the car and all the other things. To the degree that attachment to Krishna is not there, then the affinity or attachment goes to the temporary. So how to get out of the temporary and move to the permanent, Sadhu Sangha. And the sadhu means so we're going to hear, what does it mean to do Sadhu Sangha? You approach in a submissive mood, you hear, that's part of Sadhu Sangha. You carry out what you heard, that's part of Sadhu Sangha. You render some practical service, that's Sadhu Sangha. And those are limbs of getting out of the material entanglement or reviving our original bhakti within us. And as that strengthens, the material influence diminishes. There's unsteadiness in the earlier stages. That's okay. That's just the earlier stages. Then you stay with the process of Sadhu Sangha and everything that follows Sadhu Sangha. Gradually purification, gradually steadiness, etc. The further stages, unfolding of bhakti, are naturally evolving. Okay, so that's text 20, Canto 3, Chapter 25, a little discussion on the verse. Let's see if there's some questions.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I noticed that a lot of times when we think of sadhus, we usually think of the spiritual master, and we forget about the shiksha gurus. Because a lot of times devotees will say, we have many shikshas, Prabhu, we have many shikshas, but in reality, how many shikshas can we have? I feel like it almost feels like we all have like certain shikshas that are sent to us in this lifetime that are here to help us and guide us on the path of spiritual realization. And I don't know, maybe this might be just I could be wrong, but I feel like I don't want to sound negative, but I feel like many devotees do not necessarily appreciate the potency of shiksha association. Does this make any? Is that maybe because of the fact that they think like, they're also like me initiated, and they don't necessarily have the the name of a sannyas or anything, like something higher than that. I feel like
I'm listening.
It's a lot more difficult to submit to a shiksha than to Diksha Guru. I'm giving an observation overall.
You're kind of like fireworks.
Yeah.
You're throwing a lot of things out.
Yeah.
Let's go to some simple things.
Sure.
One simple thing is, what is the meaning of Shiksha Guru? I'll speak. I'll explain.
Okay.
The Shiksha Guru is, first of all, Guru is an absolute position. Pause. Absolute means in relation to the absolute. Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru are absolute positions. So having many Shiksha Gurus is a bit of a challenge, because each of these persons are absolute, and supposing one might have an opinion or position on something that's different than the other, and different than the other, and different than the other, and one spins out. Mm-hmm. So how do you have absolute affinity for an absolute personality that have different views? Especially you're still not yet in a mature stage of bhakti. You're still growing, still a toddler. Mm-hmm. Or adolescent in bhakti. So let's go back. What's a Shiksha Guru? It's a person whom I accept in an absolute way. Now, in Madhurya Kandambani, you've heard of that book?
Yes.
There's a discussion on this topic, and one of the points is the etiquette. If one feels affinity for a particular, not many, a particular person as Shiksha Guru, one goes to Diksha Guru to seek confirmation. Mm-hmm. Is it appropriate does this meet with, so it's a Shiksha from the Diksha Guru to say yes or no or something. So the submission starts with Diksha Guru, or not starts with Diksha Guru. Submission becomes, that's like the Supreme Court. While there's a Supreme Court, the Supreme Court may give full deference to Shiksha Guru. And then the Shishya who looks to Shiksha Guru is to accept the instructions of Shiksha Guru as absolute. It's not just good advice or a wise person. That's another category of sadhu. Mm-hmm. But sadhu is not, going back to what you said, the preamble. Sadhu doesn't mean necessarily Shiksha Guru. I can see someone as a sadhu without seeing them as a Shiksha Guru.
I see.
I can see someone as a friend, or whatever you want to say, mentor, guide, counselor. That's not Shiksha Guru. Because Shiksha Guru is absolute. And the absolute is, that's it. Because it's absolute. Because it's absolute. Now, sadhu is also representing, in a confidential way, the Supreme. But then there's, how do I regard that sadhu in comparison to how I regard Shiksha Guru, in comparison to how I regard Diksha Guru. So it requires some, in the positive sense, discrimination or culture. To see this is this, and that's that, and the other thing is the other thing. And I have I have culture, so I know how to address myself to this and that and the other thing in a way that's not offensive to anybody. Nor am I caught in a bind because this one says different than that one says different than the other one. I know, the etiquette, and based upon the etiquette, the manner in which I'm to conduct myself. So one of the teachings of, if a shiksha guru offers some shiksha and one is in doubt whether the diksha guru would approve of that shiksha, then it's the obligation of the shishya. You go to the diksha guru. I received this shiksha, this instruction. Does it meet your approval?
I see.
The Supreme Court, just simple metaphors. So that remains. So then the identification of Diksha Guru is very important. And it's like, it's eternal. As one's relationship with Krishna is eternal.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So to help yourself become more clear about the definition of, let's make 4 categories. Someone who is wise, who you take guidance from. And there's many such persons. You can call them shiksha gurus, that's okay. It's not really what a shiksha guru is. Someone who you have trust in and you take guidance from. Then elevate it. They become the sadhu. Sadhu doesn't have to be a renunciate. The sadhu is a sadhu. The definition we're going to hear shortly. What are the characteristics of a sadhu? And then they hold a special position in my heart, in my life, when I have the opportunity to be in the association of such a sadhu. They hold a special place in the hierarchy of my life. And amongst many persons who may be in your life or anyone's life, sadhu, someone may take a very special, elevated role of shiksha guru. Now, commonly these days, I have a little complaint. The term shiksha guru is watered down. It's not relative, it's absolute.
I see.
And it's with the permission or under the authority of Diksha Guru. And then there's Shiksha Gurus, and they have a very, very important role, and the Diksha Guru has a very important role. Now, all of these are representatives of Krishna. It doesn't diminish anyone's position, but it's just discriminating, like a child growing up. I have my mother and father, and then I have the other persons who I may look up to, etc. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dandrat Pranam Maharaj. Question is...
you got to hold the microphone closer and speak up.
Okay. So, I'm trying to understand and trying to think loud. This attachment is feeling, willing, whatever towards is the attachment.
Attachment is what?
Whatever are feeling, willing, and all towards something is the attachment to that.
Okay, you're looking for a definition of attachment. Yes.
Yeah.
You're making a statement
I'm continuing
of what you
my
think
question.
attachment is. And
Yes.
You're looking for validation.
Yes, and I have continuation.
Well, it's a nice definition that's maybe modified a little bit. Attachment means that which I hold to be very important, of value. An object that I hold to be of value to me. It's important. This object is important to me. So let's take a child. A child may have in their hand something. And it's real easy for a child to become attached to that something. It's not necessarily of any real value, but they hold it of value simply because it's in their hand. Now, supposing that child has something in their hand that's unwholesome, like broken glass. So what to do? If you try to just take it from the child, they may start to cry and scream. However, if this is Prabhupada's example, if the parent or mother or somebody, guardian, shows something that rattles and glitters, the child will drop that thing and reach for the other thing. Then they become attached to something else. So it's quite temporary. Detachment can be quite temporary, but it's that which I feel is in the category of mine, or at least an object that's meaningful to me, and it's a source of enjoyment for me, and that's, those are some of the features of attachment. That's just in principle what attachment is, which is, I think, what your question. So something I hold to be important, and I feel some affinity for it. It's important to me. Next.
As a Gruhastha, I need to take care of my kids and all. So here, if I don't want to have any attachment,
No. That's not possible. It's not advisable. And it's not possible. You'd be a lousy householder if you had no attachment. The advice is not, householders, be unattached in the absolute sense. Be attached in the absolute sense and see the attachment of the household family members and the paraphernalia and stuff, and see those entities mentioned in relation to the training, is in relation to the Supreme, the soul, the coverings of the souls, the bodies, and so forth. So let's take, for example, as a housewife or as a mother, most mothers are engaged in kitchen activities. So it's not like be unattached to the kitchen or the kitchen activities, but to cook for the family, that's a motherly function. Do that in Krishna consciousness. Keep the paraphernalia very clean, the items to be purchased when you go shopping. It's for the family is getting the benefit, but the attachment is transferred to Krishna. It doesn't make the attachment to family zero. It spiritualizes the attachment to family. It becomes richer, fuller, and liberating, not binding. Did that address your question? Not exactly.
Yes, Maharaj. So yes, the attachment is okay. So
Yes,
as I understand, the attachment should be there.
It
Okay.
must be there. It is there. It's of the soul. You can't take it away.
Yeah.
That was what the purport said.
Yes. So that attachment for kids and all will be there, but whatever we are doing as a responsibility and as part of Krishna's service.
Yes, exactly. Well said.
And there is no acting in this case, right?
No what? Say it again. There's no what?
Acting, because sometimes but you answered me my question, because attachment and love we should have on the kids.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
You would be a lousy parent if you didn't have that. So now, being a good parent and have that, how do I leverage that which is natural and make progress in spiritual life at the same time? Because attachment to the temporary is material and attachment to the Supreme is spiritual. So how am I to make spiritual progress? Do I negate the attachment to the temporary, or how do I spiritualize the attachment that's natural for the temporary? Not only as a householder, as a soul that's with a body living in this world. The bondage Did you attend the class yesterday night? Okay. You remember that image of the glance of Mahavishnu. Shambhu carries the glance, right? And within the glance, there's two things. There's the jivas, and there's time. And the time has subdivisions. And so those jivas contact pradhan, or the material energy. And the very first thing that happens, even before we get bodies, before there's anything else that happens, we get covered with false ego. And it's the first thing to come, and it's the last thing to go. False ego. Before you even get a body, or go through the cycle of birth and death, there's false ego covering the soul. Along with then the karma of previous lifetimes, previous material creations, even previous material universe, etc., and the modes of nature. And so there we are. We're in this wrapper, or in this bondage. And now we're talking about how to get out of bondage. So Prabhupada's phrase, it's a nice phrase, use a thorn to remove a thorn. So we use to become thornless. The liberated position isn't I don't care and I'm numb to my desires and my... So yes, it's duty, but what's the duty unto whom? It's my duty, it's of the soul duty, and I do things with my mind and my body, etc. And I have feelings and all that, and that's quite fine. Now, leverage it, or transition it, or move it from the only material attachment to attachment to Krishna. And attachment to Krishna doesn't mean make the other thing zero. That's impersonal. Don't make that mistake. I mean, most parents don't make that mistake. They just remain attached to the material. In the name of, I've got my little badge on that says I'm a Krishna Bhakta. See, here's my tilak and my kunti mala, and I remain attached to the material. Which is okay, it's a stage, but bhakti means more than that. So it's a transition between material and spiritual. It's not easy. It's not snap your fingers and okay, transition. It's a cultivation, and there's a process of cultivation. Something more?
Small question, Maharaj.
Okay.
How do you define bhakti, Maharaj?
How would you define bhakti? There's two standard definitions. You know what they are? You get your pen out. Pen and paper. Two standard definitions. One is Rupa Goswami's. Look up and take the first word, anyabhilashita, anya abhilash shunya. Anyabhilashita shunyam. That's how it starts. Anya means other. Abhilash means desire. Shunya means zippo. Zero. Shunya. Other desires, zero. Which other desires? Jnana and karma. Anavritam, they're dismissed. That's what bhakti isn't. And then what bhakti is, which is your question, but you have to say what bhakti isn't also. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam bhaktir uttama. Bhakti is uttama, it's pure, it's topmost, and it's a cultivation. Prabhupada writes in Nectar Devotion, bhakti is a sort of cultivation. You can read in the introduction to Nectar Devotion, Look it up. Bhakti is a sort of cultivation. That's right in line with what your question is about. Bhakti is a sort of cultivation. Cultivation of what? Cultivation of attachment to Krishna. Yeah, but I'm attached to the temporary. So how do I develop an attachment to not the temporary? Sadhu Sangha. Then I have to see sadhu properly. That was the prior discussion. A transparent and confidential representative of transcendence, of absolute truth, the Supreme Person. That's how I'm supposed to see sadhu. And what do sadhus do? Just read this section and you'll find the answer to your question. So that's what a definition. That's one definition of bhakti. Here's number 2. It's from Narada Pancharatra, and it starts Sarva Upadi Vinir Muktam. Muktam means liberation, right? One must, to engage in bhakti, one must become free from upadis. What's an upadi? An upadi is a designation. Like, I'm a householder. That's a designation. It's not who you are. It's okay. You have one. You have a body and you have a designation. You're in a woman's body and, so you got those designations. But that's not who you are. So it starts with understanding who you aren't. Then it's understanding who you are. You're Krishna's eternal servant. That's bhakti. And what is bhakti? It's Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. Very simple. Senses, Rishikas, engage in the service of Rishika. Rishikena Rishikesha, Rishika Isha. The controller of the Rishikas, the controller of the senses, the master, the lord of the senses, is to be served by the senses. That's bhakti, with the purpose, the intention that Krishna is to be pleased. So you do your household duties, etc., with the intention that Krishna is to be pleased, and that's bhakti. And you cultivate it without designation. I live within the confines of my designation. I have the designation of sannyasi. So I don't do the duties of a householder. The householder doesn't do the duties of a sannyasi, and so forth. We accept the designation, that's the thorn, to remove the thorn. What's the objective? Become attached to Krishna. Circling back. So I'm looking at the clock. It's 8:32. Okay, I'll take an online question. You're going to read the online question. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Maharaj, there's 2 of them.
2 of them.
Yes. So the first one is by Vamsi Krishna Somasi. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. How to understand anecdotal examples of living entities instantly getting liberated by Sadhu Sangha or desire of sadhu, like Mahaprabhu delivering universe with Haridas Thakur, etc.
Is the question saying if somebody doesn't do anything, how does the soul get liberated? Is that what the question is? How to understand anecdotal examples of living entities instantly getting liberated by Sadhu Sangha or desire of sadhu. Well, Mahaprabhu liberating the universe in his discussion with Haridas Thakur is not like all of a sudden living entities just went soaring through the air and went to the spiritual world. That's not the understanding. It's rather the merciful nature. So the merciful nature of a sadhu giving the gift of their mercy to a living entity, the living entity still has to say yes. And commonly, generally speaking, living entities need to perform activities that are in alignment with the sadhu's teaching and message. They have to apply the bhakti that the sadhu is giving in their life. And that's the method of liberation. So that's how to understand. It's not the instantaneous zoom, there they go to the liberated position. It's a misunderstanding of what that means. It's the mercy is given, the mercy is accepted, the mercy brings about transformation, and the transformation brings liberation. Huh? I see. Lal Gopal. If a disciple did not make it this lifetime, returning to Krishna, what is the position or relationship of that guru to his disciple in the next lifetime? Well, my understanding is the relation is eternal. So exactly, this is where the part of the mystery comes. Exactly what does that look like? Because sometimes people, you put that little adverb. Exactly, what does that look like? Well, it can be many, 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 many exactlies, depending upon the circumstance. Here's a classic example. Bilvamangala Thakur had a guru, Somagiri. However, he became deviated as a Brahmana, and as a Brahmana householder, instead he became attracted to and addicted to a prostitute. And the prostitute spoke to him in such a way that he could understand it was his guru, Somagiri, speaking through her. So the relationship is eternal, but it may become covered and forgotten and so many other things. But how does it work? It's variable, depending upon the orchestration of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the relationship is eternal. So again, exactly how does that work? Well, it's various how it works. It's directed because the Guru is representative of Krishna, then the Guru acts according to how Krishna directs. And the Guru is very submissive to the directions of Krishna. They act on behalf of Krishna. So let's, take so many examples. But here's one. Prabhupada had so many disciples. Some number, 4,500 or something like that. And during his lifetime, what to speak of after his departure, many of those who received initiation from him slackened or worse in devotional service. So what happens to that relationship because they received Diksha from Prabhupada? Prabhupada is bound, and they're bound to him eternally and transcendentally. But this is, as we discussed yesterday evening and mentioned again today, these two topics, Shiva Tattva and Guru Tattva, are very complex and not easy to understand. The principle is, the question is, what happens? And the relationship being eternal, it's up to Krishna how does it happen? But the commitment it's like the commitment of a father, Prabhupada's example, to a son, even if the son leaves home and becomes deviant or something, the father's affection remains. Now, in modern times, the father's affection may turn into something else. But naturally speaking, there's affection. So that's Krishna's position, and that's Guru's position. They're both absolute persons in relation to a jiva, and they act even if they don't make their way back to Godhead, which is what the question is. They act. Krishna acts through Guru. And so how does that happen exactly? It's variable. According to Krishna's indication, that's how Guru acts in relation to Krishna's indication. Okay, I'm going to end. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.